Oscar Piastri had a season in 2025 that, on paper, looks impressive, yet in reality leaves a sense of major disappointment. At one stage he led the standings comfortably, with what looked like a safe cushion over his closest rivals. But when the season entered its most critical phase, that advantage disappeared, and Piastri was forced to accept a brutal outcome. The world title went to his own teammate, while Max Verstappen staged an almost impossible comeback and finished just 2 points away from the championship lead. From there, one discussion dominated the paddock and the fanbase. Was McLaren too fair to the point that it actually harmed Piastri? That debate has been going on for months, but a fresh statement from Verstappen has dragged it back into the spotlight. He suggested that when a driver obeys team orders without a clear reason, it is effectively the same as selling your soul to the team. From that moment onwards, according to Verstappen, the team will always feel entitled to control you. That comment does not only challenge McLaren's philosophy, it directly questions Piastri's mentality as a driver who is still building his identity at the top level of Formula One. So what is this really? Is Verstappen trying to play psychological warfare? Or is he simply stating an uncomfortable truth that many people don't want to admit? And if he is right, what does this mean for Piastri and even his long-term future at McLaren? We're going to break it down properly and look at it from every angle. If you want to follow the full discussion and not miss any key context, do consider subscribing. Then let's move into the analysis. To understand why Verstappen's words carry weight, you have to go back to how strong Oscar Piastri actually was in 2025. At one point after Zandvoort, he led by 34 points and had control of the championship picture. He headed the standings for months from early in the year until Mexico, and during that period he was not simply surviving. He looked calm, composed, and capable of managing a title campaign. He had the car, with McLaren comfortably good enough to win races and control weekends. He had the consistency, rarely making unforced errors, and crucially, he had the momentum. Yet the season still slipped away. That collapse did not happen in isolation. It was shaped by a collection of moments that continue to define this discussion. Monza remains the most symbolic of them. Lando Norris suffered a slow pit stop, fell behind, and McLaren asked Piastri to give the position back. He questioned it. He knew what it meant in a title fight, but he complied. That single decision created a sizable point swing, and it was exactly the type of moment Verstappen later referenced. When asked whether he would ever accept such an instruction in that situation, Verstappen replied very directly, "Definitely not." He then delivered the line that detonated this entire narrative. If you do that once without a clear reason, you sell your soul. The team can then do whatever it wants with you. He reminded everyone that Piastri was in the middle of the title fight. Coming from a four-time world champion who built his career on absolute refusal to yield unless it served him strategically, that criticism stings. But Monza was not the only point of friction. Singapore provided another flashpoint. Norris made contact with Piastri while completing an overtake, but the consequences between the two did not feel balanced, and it deepened the perception that Piastri often found himself on the wrong side of the outcome. Then came Qatar, described by Damon Hill as the absolute low point. McLaren chose not to pit under the safety car, the call made under the umbrella of trying to maintain fairness and avoid favouritism, quite possibly cost Piastri what could have been a crucial victory. Hill reflected on that moment later and said, "I think he probably felt the worst he was going to feel after Qatar. I think he could not believe what had happened there." Hill then went further regarding Monza, calling it quite a big thing to do to give points away to a teammate who might beat you to the World Championship. His conclusion was blunt. Piastri will probably look at it and think, maybe I won't do that again. So when Verstappen fires in with, "You've sold your soul," the timing is perfect. It lands straight into a context already filled with frustration, debate, and introspection. But is Verstappen purely criticising, or is he also framing himself? He also said that if he had driven that McLaren in 2025, he believes the championship would have been decided earlier. That line adds something very telling. It is part confidence, part provocation, and part message to Piastri. You had the machinery, you simply did not assert yourself enough. McLaren, of course, defends its philosophy. Zak Brown wrote openly that Piastri deserves immense credit, describing him as a driver whose professionalism, maturity and quality far exceed his years. He emphasized that McLaren wanted a level playing field, insisting that neither driver would receive preferential treatment, even deep in a title fight. The team stuck to that throughout the season. They believe the concept works. They won back-to-back Constructors' Championships, they produced two drivers capable of fighting for wins, and they kept control of the dynamic in a situation that could easily have exploded. From their standpoint, the results validate the method. But results in Formula One are not just numbers, they are emotional, political, and deeply personal. For Piastri, it now becomes a question of identity as much as competition. He has spoken calmly about fairness, acknowledging that it was tough at times, but also saying it pushed both drivers to improve. He even dismissed the notion that Norris's new world champion status changes anything, saying, "He's still Lando Norris, it's not like he's become Superman." That is measured, controlled, and very true to Piastri's character, but the question hanging over him is whether remaining measured is enough, because others in the paddock are already projecting forward. Marcin Budkowski suggested that if in-team fighting continues or McLaren falls backwards, Piastri could eventually look elsewhere, even though he is contracted long-term. That does not mean he will leave, but it establishes an important reality. Loyalty has limits when a driver feels restricted. Verstappen's words poke directly at that pressure point. If you allow a team to dictate terms in one situation, will they ever stop? If you become the compliant driver, does that label ever truly fade? This then evolves into something bigger than Piastri alone. It becomes a philosophical clash about what Formula One truly is at the sharp end. McLaren believes fairness can coexist with ruthless performance. Verstappen comes from an environment where clarity of hierarchy and unconditional self-priority are part of the DNA. One school believes balance builds strength. The other believes power comes from making one driver unquestionably the focal point. In 2025, McLaren proved their way can win championships. But Verstappen argues that even if it wins for the team, it may still be costly for the individual. And now we move into 2026, where the context resets. New regulations, new power units, potentially a new competitive order. Zak Brown has expressed optimism. Andrea Stella has spoken with confidence about McLaren's technical department and the standards they carry into this next era. Meanwhile, Red Bull openly acknowledges that manufacturing their own engine with Ford will bring tough months and headaches, even if the goal remains clear. No one truly knows how the pecking order will fall, which makes Verstappen's statement even more dangerous. It plants a psychological burden on Piastri before a lap has even been turned in anger next season. Does Oscar come back as the same calm, obedient, team-value driver? Or does he return sharper, harder, more selfish when he needs to be? Hill has already said he must think more about himself. Verstappen has effectively accused him of surrendering control. These are not trivial remarks. They shape expectation, they shape perception, and importantly, they could shape how Piastri handles the next decisive moment when McLaren once again finds itself having to choose between absolute fairness and decisive prioritization. There is also the human side to consider. Piastri is only 3 seasons into his Formula One career. He has already fought for a world championship. He has beaten Verstappen on track. He has pushed Norris into the best form of his life. He is not a passive figure who simply allowed the season to slip away without resistance. But Formula One is brutal in how it defines narratives. You can be exceptional for 20 races, and people will remember the 3 that broke you. Verstappen's line crystallizes the harshest possible version of that story. The suggestion is not simply that Piastri lost, it is that he allowed himself to be controlled. In the end, this is why the quote has so much power. It is sharp, it is cutting, and it goes beyond racing mechanics into personal pride. Whether Verstappen is being brutally honest, deliberately provocative, or both at the same time, he has opened a psychological front that will not disappear quickly. Every time Piastri is asked to follow a team instruction next season, this comment will echo in the background. Every time McLaren tries to prove that papaya rules still work, someone will bring it up. It becomes part of the permanent conversation, which leaves one final question hanging over everything as we head into the new era. Is Max Verstappen exposing an uncomfortable truth about McLaren and Piastri, or is this simply a ruthless competitor trying to destabilise a future rival before the next battle even begins? And more importantly, when the next high-pressure moment arrives, will Oscar Piastri obey again? Or will we see a very different driver this time? Tell me what you think in the comments. Is this psychological warfare, or is Verstappen absolutely right?